In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Our scripture comes from the Gospel of Mark 10:32 through 45, and it reads, "And they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. And they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, 'See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him, and after 3 days he will rise.' And James and John, sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, 'Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.' And he said to them, 'What do you want me to do?' And they said to him, 'Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory.' Jesus said to them, 'You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism which I am baptized?' And they said to him, 'We are able.' And Jesus said to them, 'The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those whom it has been prepared.' And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, 'You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many.'" The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, the title of this message is "The Cost of Greatness." Now, you all know we live in a culture where everybody wants to be rich and famous. And if you can't be rich and famous, they at least want to be well-known and comfortable, right? All right, most of these same people are looking for instant greatness, but it comes at a cost. And most times this cost is something that we are not willing to pay. So let me tell you a story. This group of friends were walking down an alley to their cars. This neighborhood had a reputation of being pretty rough, what some would say on the wrong side of the tracks. Some in this group were amazed at what they saw around them, and the others were just a little bit scared. But who could blame them? Here we are, stirring up trouble in a much-neglected neighborhood where not much has changed in years. The people here do what they want, when they want, whomever they want. And surely they have no regard for laws, rules, and no regard for each other. Drugs are rampant, illicit sex is prevalent, trash is all over the place, small children wander around without any supervision. Frankly, to me, it's a big mess. But the people living here, like it or not, have adjusted. Now, here we are with this small group of volunteers trying to clean up the streets, run off the drug dealers and the gang members, and attempting to teach self-respect to the young women. No wonder this group is so unpopular to the people around here. As we walk to the cars, we are reminded that we must continue the work no matter what opposition we face. We have to try and make the neighborhood better. That the gangbangers and others want us out of here is obvious. Every chance they get, they try to kill our progress and assassinate our reputations. They have tried to discredit any successes we have made, but we keep working. They try to discredit any successes we've had, but we keep working. 2 of the volunteers have asked for special favors. They want to know if they can be executive directors when the new outreach program we're launching starts. The director asked them if they are sure that's what they wanted. Are you sure you can endure the scrutiny and the ridicule, the long hours, and the time spent away from your families, or face the sense of hopelessness and disinterested of the people themselves? The other volunteers hearing this got all bent out of shape, thinking that somebody was getting ahead of them and they should have asked for these positions first. You see, everybody wants to be held in high esteem. Everybody wants to be in charge. Everybody wants to be first. They want to have all of the greatness without any of the sacrifice. But our leaders try to remind them, you must become a servant to all if you want to be great. Remember, we're here to serve, not to be served, and to give our lives in service to many. So does this story sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Of course it does. It's a contemporary retelling of the story we just found in Mark. Jesus was the one to stir things up. He was more interested in changing the status quo. He was preaching. His preaching was making a difference in the lives of the people he ministered to. In other words, Jesus was changing the neighborhood. On the road to Jerusalem, Jesus told his disciples for a third time of his impending suffering and death and resurrection. The disciples were always more interested or more worried about their status and power, the position that they were about to get, than they were understanding what Jesus was trying to explain to them. In each case, they acted inappropriately. We see that in chapter 8 when he tells them, Peter rebuked him. Peter rebuked Jesus because of what he claimed about his death. Scholars have said that Peter's response demonstrates human resistance to God. Jesus tells of his fate a second time in chapter 9, but the disciples were arguing about who was the greatest. In this passage, we have James and John asking for positions of power and honor. We too have often been more concerned about our status and position, and when we don't get that status we seek, we too become resistant to God. The disciples missed the fact that with great leadership brings about great responsibility to others. The disciples argued among themselves about who was the greatest. James and John wanted to be great leaders and have positions of honor. That's no different from the way we act today. People have a total disregard for God and the ways of God as they strive for power and greatness. But Jesus teaches us that in order to be great, we must be responsible to others and become a servant. Jesus stated that if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant to all. In our culture, we see this as demeaning to take the lowly position. We want to have servants, not be servants. The more people willing to serve you, the higher the world esteems you. This is contrary to what Jesus teaches us. In verses 43 and 44, he states, "But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be the greatest among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all." So how can we see ourselves following the teachings of Jesus in our day? Jesus asked James and John if they were able to drink of the cup he would have to drink from or be baptized with his baptism. The cup is a representation of Jesus' mission. If we drink of the cup, we share the same kind of suffering that he endured. In essence, he was asking us, how far are we willing to go in our discipleship? Are you willing to give up some of your free time because you're out in the community working? Are you willing to share your income with a family in need? Are you willing to suffer being arrested because you were in Ferguson protesting injustice? Can you stand to lose friends because they don't understand your vision of service to others? After all, who wants to give up a position of power and status? James Smart, a professor of biblical interpretation, wrote, "At his baptism, Jesus became empowered for his mission with the Spirit of God. When we share in his mission and in his baptism, we share in his mission, made possible by that empowerment, and to share the cost of belonging so completely and unconditionally with God in a world that even at its very best is blindly and brutally resistant to God. When we are willing to answer yes to Jesus' question, can you drink from the cup that I will drink from and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, then his mission becomes our mission. That mission is to build up hope and increase faith in God for the people who no longer have hope and faith. How you say? By helping to clean up neighborhoods, getting involved with the community, and teaching young women self-respect and decency. Teaching young men to respect themselves and others. By standing up against systems that cause young people to sell drugs instead of opening businesses. Caring enough to nurture gang members so that they become a part of your family and have the family that they are looking for. When I started this message, I said I had something I wanted to share with you. So currently I work at a library. It's located in a neighborhood much like the one I described to you. There's very little parental supervision, And most days we have children who come into the library when the library opens, and they don't leave until the library closes. And nobody gives them food, nobody gives them anything except the library staff, and that's whatever we can scrounge up. When I started there in June of last year, I'd only been on the job about 90 days. After 90 days, we heard a commotion outside, and about 400 yards away from our library, 4 young men had been shot. About a month or so after that, a young man was in a store trying to steal a beer. The store owner shot at him and thought he didn't know he hit him, but actually the young man died in somebody's backyard because he bled out a couple days later. A father of 4 was shot by a group of males trying to rob him. He made it home in time to die in front of his 8-year-old daughter and his 6-year-old son. Now, we've had some frequent guests who come to our library, one of which we kind of saw on the news by accident, who had stabbed his sister. Another case was a young man who comes into our library all the time with his 2 little girls, was at a party on the 4th of July. He was drinking. He shot his brother. When he came to himself, he locked himself up in a hotel and shot himself. We've had a number of drive-by shootings. We have a 6-year-old boy who visits us in the library who was shot by a stray bullet. And then one of our teenage girls was hit by a stray bullet that went through a school bus. All of this has happened within walking distance of where I work, and I've only been there a little over a year and a half. There's a sense of hopelessness that runs through this neighborhood and through neighborhoods across the country. People don't feel like they have a voice, and they have no way of improving their conditions. Jesus said, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." So as a community of faith, we must be willing to follow the model of service rendered by great leaders as Mother Teresa, Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, and Dr. King. And I'm sure you can remember people in your neighborhood who have stood up against oppression, who tried to make sure that the children in the neighborhood have stayed safe, and who actually fed those kids at their own expense. They also try to clean up the neighborhood and keep it tidy. We are called to give our lives as a ransom for others, to give up our time, our support, our finances, and even our prayers as a ransom for others who've lost hope and faith. Let's help them to see the love of God and tell them about the love of Jesus. Let's help restore our communities and serve like our lives depend on it. So if you really want to be great, first be responsible, even to the point of laying down your life in service to your neighbors. Amen?
Amen.